Daryl Morey, in his end-of-season press conference on Sunday, revealed what the Sixers' draft strategy might be in the upcoming 2025 NBA draft. So we're going to take what he said and see if we can't predict what prospects the Sixers might be interested in based on where their pick might land. Did a whole video on yesterday's show on everything that was talked about in Daryl Morey and Nick Nurse's press conference, as well as we heard from some of the players on the team regarding their future. So if you missed that, be sure to go back and check that video out after you watch today's show. Now, before we get into what Daryl Morey had to say about the NBA draft, we are doing a sub battle here in the walls at Chat Sports between us here at 76ers Now and our rival channel at Celtics Today. They're kind of kicking our ass, I'm not going to lie, right now in the April sub battle, up by, what is that, over 60 subs right now. So we got some room to make up. They got a playoff run going on, of course. That's going to help them out a little bit, but I know that us Sixers fans can help us out and beat those Boston Celtics. If we can't do it on the court, we can at least try to do it here at Chat Sports. So if you're looking for a place to get all your Sixers coverage all off season long and you're not subscribed yet, go down, hit that sub button, and let's catch Celtics today. Now let's get right into what Daryl Morey had to say about the NBA draft plan for the 76ers. Definitely best player available. Has to be that high in the draft for sure, but we see the pick as a tool to upgrade the team, and obviously it'll depend if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or we end up getting that pick in the future, but it's just a tool to make the team better. Obviously, there's a good chance we'll take someone. In that case, it will just be the best player. I've never shied away from that. And Daryl Morey basically laying it out for you right there, that wherever it lands, Sixers can land anywhere from 1 through 6. If it's outside of the top 6, the pick does go to Oklahoma City. So, again, this is all assuming they keep that pick, which about a 65% chance they keep the pick. But Daryl Morey's draft history kind of goes along with what he's saying right here, where, look, he's just going to go best player available and not worry too much about where the player might fit on the roster. He's going to look, in particular, it seems to be that he always takes guys who have fallen down past where they've been ranked on the consensus big board. And you take a look at some of his draft picks with the 76ers over the past few years, like every player he's taken has fallen farther than where they should have based on the consensus draft board entering the draft. Jared McCain was pre-draft number 14, fell to 16, Sixers took him. Same draft, Adam Bona last year, pre-draft ranked 34, he falls to 41, Sixers take him. Tyrese Maxey fell from 13 to 21. Obviously, a great pick there. And Isaiah Joe and Paul Reed, even though they're not in the team anymore, two guys that were also picked later than what consensus had them going at. So can this, knowing Daryl Morey's draft strategy, both what he said and his actions in the draft, can that help us predict who the Sixers might take? I think it will. Now, of course, it all depends what pick the Sixers end up landing. Currently, these are the odds the Sixers have for landing each pick 1 through 6 in the draft. Funny enough, they have the 5th best odds right now in the lottery, but only a 2.2% chance to actually get the number 5 pick. It's funny how the NBA does their lottery odds, but about a 10% chance to land anywhere from 1 through 4 for each of those picks. As I said, just 2% to get number 5, very strange. And then about a 20% chance to land number 6. So I'd imagine they probably land at 6, but look, if they jump up, and that would be great. So when you take a look at this year's consensus big board, if you don't know what the consensus big board actually means, basically it's you take all these big boards that all these different outlets have made, ESPN, The Ringer, Yahoo Sports, all these, and it takes all the rankings and combines them into one pretty much average consensus ranking. So right now, the top 4 guys, and according to the consensus big board, but in my opinion too, these are the easy top 4 guys in the draft: Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe. If the Sixers jump up into the top 4, they're going to take one of these guys. If they get number 1, of course, it'll be Flagg. If they jump up to number 2, Flagg goes number 1. I think Dylan Harper, you take and you run with it at number 2. He's the clear second best player in this draft. Number 3, number 4, you can debate it a little bit between Ace Bailey and VJ Edgecombe. But look, if they jump into the top 4, or if for some reason one of these guys falls to number 5 or number 6, Daryl Morey and the Sixers will take one of these 4 guys, whoever is available. After that, though, after the top 4, that's where things get a little bit interesting. And since the Sixers most likely are not going to be inside the top 4, I think it makes more sense to look at this next group of guys, these next 5 guys from number 5 to number 9, as who they could take. Now, Tre Johnson at the top of the consensus big board right now at number 5, followed by Kasparas Jakucionis, Kon Knueppel, Jeremiah Fears, who's been a riser as of late, and then Kon Knueppel out of Duke. So as I mentioned, right now, the number 5 consensus player, if the Sixers do get that 5th overall pick and they want to go best player available, that guy right now would be Tre Johnson. And we've talked about Tre Johnson a lot on the show. Somebody that has been mocked to the Sixers in multiple different mock drafts that I've seen that people have done on the internet. And I just have never been a super fan of the pick. Look, he's a guy that can absolutely put the ball in the basket playing on that wing. I've just had concerns about his true size, being just under 6'6", under 190 pounds, decent wingspan, and of course lit it up in his 1 year at Texas in the SEC. Led the SEC in scoring at nearly 20 points a game, and he can score in a variety of ways and has a ways to go developing on the defensive side of the ball and getting to the rim to be a true all-around scorer. But I would agree that I think he is the 5th best player in this draft. So this, to me, if the Sixers do get number 5, or they're at number 6 and he's still there, I think this is the route that Daryl Morey would go. When you just talk about his strategy, going best player available, he seems to me, it's not a huge gap, but I think clearly the 5th best guy in this draft. Now, despite that, even though I think you could predict that Daryl Morey would go that route, I still don't think I would agree with the pick. Not that I'd be upset about it and call it a disaster and give the Sixers an F on my grades video. I still think it would be a fine pick, but I wouldn't agree with it in particular because I just don't like his fit on this team. And I don't think he's such a sure thing to be this bona fide great player that you go ahead and take him at number 5 or number 6 anyways. He can do a lot of great things out there, no doubt about it. But again, you have Maxey, you have McCain. Sixers have said they're going to prioritize bringing back Quentin Grimes. And I don't really think he can play as a true wing. I just don't. At not quite 6'6", doesn't really have the frame to do it either. Not a good enough defender, I don't think, to guard those bigger 3s or bigger 4s. So I don't really think I agree with the pick. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I want the Sixers to do or what I would do if I were running the team. What matters is what Daryl Morey is going to do, and that scouting department and their strategy. And so far, their strategy, according to Morey, is going best player available. So I think Tre Johnson, if I had to pick someone who I think they would take, I think right now that player would be Tre Johnson. But what say you? Would you like the pick of Tre Johnson at number 5 or number 6 overall, depending on where they land? Give me an L for like, give me a D for dislike. Sound off with what you think down in the comment section below. Going to get to the other 4 guys as well, because as I mentioned, I don't think there's a huge gap in that 5 through 9 range, and I think it's worth talking about these guys, because players can rise and fall, of course, as we get closer and closer to the actual NBA draft. But before we get there, got to give a shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Game Time. Game Time allows you to get the best seats at the lowest price guaranteed. Prices drop as events get closer, and with that lowest price guarantee, Game Time really is the best ticketing app out there on the market. And with their last-minute deals, which is their specialty, you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, but also concerts, comedy shows, theater events, and a whole lot more. Phillies, I know they're going through it right now, but a good series against the Giants right now. If you want to go to Citizens Bank Park, make sure to use that Game Time app. And when you're on the app, a lot of great features that you can use that really separates it from other ticketing apps. If you use the zone deals feature, you can save even more when you choose a section, like Game Time chooses seats for you. You can toggle the all-in pricing feature, shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And with their lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and a whole lot more, Game Time really does make getting tickets faster and easier for all the events you would like to go to. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats. Game Time is the only way to go when buying tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So as I mentioned earlier, going to go through these other top 9 consensus guys, these next 5 at number 5 through number 9, because guys can rise, guys can fall, and I don't think there's a huge gap between a lot of these players. So the current number 6 player on consensus big boards is Kasparas Jakucionis, the guard out of Illinois. Had a very good freshman year for Illinois, and even though they went out a little bit early in the NCAA tournament, he's a guy that a lot of different analysts and scouts like as someone who has some shot creating ability, has some passing ability, and you can see he kind of fills up that box score, 15 points, almost 6 rebounds, 4 assists. But the big question with him has been the jumper. And look, this is another player that, although I agree with the number 6 ranking, and I think when you're looking at these players in a vacuum, probably is right around that 6 range in terms of being the most talented player at this point in the draft, I also don't think he'd be the right pick at number 6. Say Tre Johnson goes number 5, Sixers are there at number 6, and Jakucionis is the best player on the consensus big board and on their big board. I would not agree with the pick once again because, at 6'6", 205, a little more size than Tre Johnson, but he plays more like a true point guard than Tre Johnson. I know some people have been wanting to get more of a true point guard next to Tyrese Maxey to allow him to play a little more off the ball, but if I'm going to do that, I also want someone who can play better defense, and Jakucionis, not great lateral quickness. He's honestly pretty turnover prone as well for a primary guard, and just very inconsistent as the season went along. So once again, I don't really think Jakucionis would be the guy I'd want to go if I'm there at number 5 or number 6. Now, somebody who I would be more interested in, and this is when you start to get into the fit conversation and guys that make more sense for the Sixers team in particular, is the number 7 consensus player, and that is Kon Knueppel. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know I'm a big fan of Kon Knueppel because of what he brings to this team from a skill set perspective, right? Being a great shooter, shot over 40% from 3 this year, off the catch and shoot, standstill threes, can bring that spacing and that three-point shooting ability that this team has needed so badly. And at 6'7" and 210 pounds, he can play on that wing. And although he's not a great defender, he's better than I think many people would give him credit for. He can do more things on offense than just catch and shoot. He can get to the rim a little bit. And I think he just fits the Sixers so much better than someone like a Tre Johnson or a Kasparas Jakucionis. So he would still be my pick at number 5, even though I don't think he's the 5th best player in this draft, and consensus would agree that he's not the 5th best player in this draft. I think when you look at what the Sixers team needs and the difference in how good these players are, I still really like Knueppel at number 5, and that's why I'm not totally sure I agree with the strategy of just going best player available no matter what. And this kind of, same thing with my number 8 and the number 8 consensus player right now in NBA draft boards, and that's Jeremiah Fears, yet another guard at 6'4", who honestly might not even be 6'4", might be closer to 6'2" or 6'3", another light player at 182 pounds. Had a great year production-wise, but look, also struggles to shoot the basketball. Had some problems there, shooting just 28% from the field this year for Oklahoma. He has upside with a jumper, but it hasn't really been able to fall. Similar to Tre Johnson, he has shot selection issues. Like, the thing with some of these guys is when they come in, they're not going to be the number 1 guy like they were in college, right? So how do they adjust then to having a smaller role offensively if they can't do other things? That's why I like some of these other players that were already complimentary players in college, like a Kon Knueppel. Again, the shooting not great, the decision-making not great, and the strength not great. So how are you going to see the floor if you're not going to be a number 1 option right away, but you're also not going to defend at a high level, and you're turning the ball over? I don't really see it. That's where, again, I like somebody like a Kon Knueppel, who's the number 9 consensus player, despite being a little bit lower down on the board. Now, I know he is someone a lot of Sixers fans like, and they think, with the Embiid injury concerns, wanting to get a better long-term backup there behind Joel Embiid, even though Adam Bona's done a good job, I would agree that Malowich would be a good pick. Kind of a weird year. The production doesn't really match, I think, the talent and especially the potential that he has. But look, I would also much rather go Malowich over Tre Johnson or Jakucionis at number 5 or number 6, because I don't think it's all just about looking at your board and saying, this is the best guy, let's just take him. Look, I get the idea of going best player available in the draft. I really, really do. Especially when you're that high, picking number 5, number 6. You do not want to mess up this pick. You want to get someone who can make an impact on your team for years to come. And look, you take somebody at the guard spot for the Sixers and you have a bunch of guards, all of a sudden you get too many guys in one position. Big deal. You can just trade one down the line. I get that method of thinking, and it does make sense, but I think it's just more nuanced than taking a look at your board, saying, all right, who's the top guy available? It's this player. Let's just take him. I think there's more to it than simply just taking the number one guy on your board. You have to look, in my opinion, at the differences between how good the players are on your draft board. If you're there at number 5, you're there at number 6, and there's a guy that's the top of your board, that's maybe the 6th best player, well, if he's not that much better than your 7th or 8th best player, but that 7th or 8th best player makes a lot more sense for your team, I think it makes more sense to go with that lower ranked player, especially for a team like the Sixers who, look, they're not in a full-on rebuild right now. Daryl Morey and Nick Nurse are going to be back. Daryl Morey has said, at least his plan right now, is to run it back with Paul George, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey. So this team's trying to win a championship next year. You want somebody who can come in and make an impact on your team, and the way you get somebody to make the biggest impact on your team is if there's a clearly defined role for them and a way that they can see the floor. So getting a player, again, as long as the talent gap isn't too great, which I don't think the talent gap is that great between the 5th and the 10th best player in this year's draft, then you take the player who you can see having the best role for your team. And sometimes that might not just be the guy that you blindly look at and say, this is the best player on my board. So again, I understand Daryl Morey's strategy, and it works a lot of the times, but then you run into other issues. Of course, you can trade guys away, as I mentioned, but I think for the Sixers team, it's not just Tre Johnson's the best guy, let's take him. There's other ways you can go. Be honest with me, though. What do you think, and what would you do if you're running the 76ers? So should the Sixers go best player available no matter what? Just take the best guy on their board, worry about fit later. Give me a Y for yes, give me an N for no. Sound off what you think down in the comments section.